An eccentric philosophy professor gave a one-question final exam after a semester dealing with a broad array of topics. The class was already seated and ready to go when the professor picked up his chair, plopped it on his desk, and wrote on the board, "Using everything we have learned this semester, prove that this chair does not exist." Fingers flew, erasers erased, notebooks were filled in furious fashion. Some students wrote over 30 pages in 1 hour, attempting to refute the existence of the chair. One member of the class, however, was up and finished in less than a minute. Weeks later, when the grades were posted, the rest of the group wondered how he could have gotten an A when he had barely written anything at all. His answer consisted of 2 words. One day, a minister gave him wrong advice, so the king ordered the minister be thrown to the ravenous and vicious guard dogs. The minister said, "I have served you loyally for 10 years, and you do this?" The king was without mercy. The minister fell on his knees and pleaded, "Please give me 10 days." The king thought about it and finally agreed. The minister went to the keeper of the dogs and told him he wanted to feed the dogs for the next 10 days. The guard was baffled, but he agreed. So the minister started feeding the dogs, caring for them, and providing all sorts of comforts for them. When the 10 days were up, the king ordered that the minister be thrown to the dog. As he was thrown in, everyone was amazed at what they saw. The ferocious dogs were wagging their tails, playing with the condemned minister. The king was baffled at what he saw. "What happened to my vicious dogs?" he growled. The minister turned to him and said, "I served the dogs for only 10 days, and they didn't forget my service. I served you for 10 years, and you forgot all of it at my first mistake." The king then realized his own great mistake. So the next day, he replaced the dogs with crocodiles. Decided to go out drinking on the night before their final exam. Still hungover from the night before, the two arrive at the university well after the exam has ended. They go straight to the professor and tell him that they couldn't get to the university on time because one of the car's tires had gone flat. Surprisingly, the professor excuses them and tells them they can come back the next day to take the exam. The 2 students study all night and return the next day ready for the exam. The professor leads them into separate rooms and hands them their exams. Spending the entire night studying is really paying off as both are completing the exam with ease. As they reach the final question, their jaws drop. The final question reads, "For 90 points. Indicate which tire went flat." A politician visits a primary school to speak to the children. During class, he asks the students if anyone can give him an example of a tragedy. Kevin raises his hand first and offers, "If my best friend is playing in the street and a car comes by and kills him, that would be a tragedy." "No," the politician says, "that would be an accident." Next, Marcy raises her hand. "If a school bus carrying 50 children drove off a cliff, killing everyone inside, that would be a tragedy." "I'm afraid not," explains the politician. "That is what we would call a great loss." The room is silent. None of the other children dare volunteer. "What?" asks the politician. "Isn't there anyone here who can give me an example of a tragedy?" Finally, little Johnny raises his hand. "If an airplane carrying a politician was blown up by a bomb, that would be a tragedy." "Marvelous!" the politician beams. "And can you tell me why that would be a tragedy?" "Well," says Johnny, "because it wouldn't be an accident, and it certainly would be no great loss." Little Johnny was sitting in class, behind a girl named Sally. The teacher asks the class, "Who created the earth?" Little Johnny pokes Sally in the back with his sharpened pencil, and she jumps and says, "My God!" The teacher says, "Yes, Sally, God did create the earth." Sally sits down. Then the teacher asks, "Where do you go after you live a good life?" Little Johnny pokes Sally again, and she jumps up and says, "Heavens to Betsy." The teacher says, "Yes, Sally, you will go to heaven after you live a good life." Sally sits down, knowing full well little Johnny was poking her. Sally gave little Johnny an angry glare, and she turned around. Then, the teacher asks the class, "What did Eve say to Adam after their 77th child?" Little Johnny pokes Sally harder this time, and Sally jumps, turns around and says, "If you stick that thing in me one more time, I swear I'm gonna lose it," and the teacher faints.